The Galactic Council had spent 3 centuries cataloging every spacefaring civilization, every fleet, every weapon in the known galaxy. Their records were perfect, their intelligence absolute. They knew of humanity's small defensive fleet, their primitive kinetic weapons, their desperate mining colonies scattered across a few dozen systems. What they didn't know was that humans had learned long ago to hide their true strength. For when an entire species spends generations preparing for a war they hope never comes, when they build in shadows and silence while the galaxy watches only the light, the revelation of that preparation tends to be rather explosive. The Council's demand for Earth's surrender would be answered, but not in the way they expected. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and the galaxy was about to receive an education in why you should never mistake human restraint for human weakness. Admiral Chenwei stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the holographic display show the massive alien fleet that had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 300 vessels, each one larger than Earth's biggest battleship, arranged in perfect formation like a wall of death against the stars. The communication array crackled to life, and a voice filled the bridge, translated by the universal language processors but carrying an unmistakable tone of arrogance and absolute authority. "Primitive species of the third planet," the voice announced, "I am High Admiral Zexthal of the Hegemony Battle Fleet. Your pathetic resistance to the Galactic Council's expansion has been noted and found amusing. You have harbored criminals, refused tribute, and dared to claim sovereignty over worlds that belong to the greater galaxy." Chen's jaw tightened as he watched the enemy formation. The aliens had positioned themselves perfectly, a textbook blockade formation that would allow them to systematically destroy Earth's orbital infrastructure while remaining safely out of range of the planet's defensive batteries. "Your species has 12 of your hours to surrender unconditionally," the transmission continued. "Failure to comply will result in the complete sterilization of your home world and the enslavement of any survivors. This is the final mercy the Council extends to lower species." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics and the barely audible breathing of the crew. Lieutenant Morrison at the communications station looked up at Chen, her young face pale but determined. "Sir, they're requesting acknowledgement of their ultimatum." Chen walked slowly to the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. At 52, he had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 30 years, but he had never imagined this moment would actually come. The war games, the endless preparations, the secret projects hidden in asteroid fields and dark space, it had all seemed like expensive paranoia until now. "Open a channel," he commanded. Morrison's fingers danced over her console. "Channel open, sir." "This is Admiral Chenwei of the United Earth Space Forces," he said calmly. "We acknowledge receipt of your ultimatum." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in his mind. "However, I'm afraid we must respectfully decline your generous offer of surrender." A few seconds passed, the delay of faster-than-light communication across the vast distances of space. Then, High Admiral Zexthal's laughter echoed through the bridge, a sound like grinding metal mixed with the hiss of escaping gas. "Decline," the alien commander said. "You misunderstand your position, human. We have analyzed your fleet composition through long-range scans. You possess 47 operational warships, most of which are converted merchant vessels with primitive kinetic weapons. Our battle fleet consists of 300 purpose-built warships equipped with plasma cannons, reality manipulation fields, and consciousness disruption weapons." Chen smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "You're quite correct about our defensive fleet, Admiral Zexthal. 47 ships is indeed all we can field for local system defense. Then, you see the futility of resistance." "Oh, I see many things," Chen replied. "For instance, I see that your formation is designed to maximize intimidation while maintaining optimal firing solutions on our orbital platforms. I see that you've positioned your command ship, that large vessel in the center rear, safely behind 3 layers of screening vessels. I also see that you've made the same mistake that every aggressor in human history has made." There was another pause, longer this time. When Zexthal spoke again, his voice had lost some of its casual arrogance. "What mistake is that, human? You assumed that what you could see was all there was to see." Chen nodded to Lieutenant Morrison, who entered a specific sequence into her console. Across the Sol system, hidden transmitters began broadcasting on frequencies that had remained silent for decades. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, massive chunks of rock that had drifted unremarked for years suddenly split open like flowers blooming in fast forward. What emerged from within them was not the crude mining equipment the aliens might have expected, but sleek ships of a design unlike anything in the known galaxy. Their hulls were a black so deep they seemed to absorb light itself, and their lines were sharp and predatory. On the dark side of Earth's moon, entire crater floors slid away to reveal hangar bays that stretched deep into the lunar surface. From these hidden facilities, more black ships emerged, first dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. In the outer system, beyond the orbit of Neptune, what had appeared to be dead space began to shimmer as cloaking fields deactivated. A massive structure revealed itself, a space station the size of a small moon, bristling with weapon emplacements and surrounded by its own fleet of guardian vessels. But the most shocking sight was what emerged from Earth itself. The planet's polar regions, areas long restricted to civilian traffic, split open along hidden seam lines. From these concealed launch bays, capital ships rose into space. Ships that dwarfed anything in humanity's known fleet, their black hulls gleaming with the same light-absorbing material as their smaller cousins. Chen watched the tactical display as contact after contact appeared on the screens around the bridge. His crew was silent, awed by the sight of the Black Fleet revealing itself after decades of secrecy. "You see, Admiral Zexthal," Chen said into the still-open communication channel, "humanity learned something important during our early years in space. We learned that the galaxy was full of older, more powerful civilizations who viewed us as either potential vassals or convenient resources. We learned that peace was a luxury we couldn't afford to take for granted. The alien fleet was breaking formation now, their perfect parade ground positioning dissolving as ship commanders reacted to the sudden appearance of thousands of unknown contacts throughout the Sol system. So we prepared," Chen continued. "While you catalogued our 47 defense ships and laughed at our primitive weapons, we built a different kind of fleet. A fleet designed not for defense, but for a very specific purpose, to ensure that anyone who threatened humanity would regret it for whatever brief time remained to them." High Admiral Zexthal's voice came back, higher-pitched now and lacking its earlier confidence. "This is impossible. Our intelligence networks have monitored your system for decades. We know every ship you've built." "You know every ship we've let you see," Chen corrected. "Tell me, Admiral, in all your intelligence gathering, did you ever wonder why Earth's energy consumption patterns included massive power draws to facilities that didn't seem to exist? Did you question why our asteroid mining operations extracted 10 times more raw materials than we seem to be using?" The tactical display showed the Black Fleet continuing to emerge from hiding places throughout the solar system. Chen's smile grew wider as he watched the count climb, 5,000 ships, then 10,000, then 15,000. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering, built in secret shipyards hidden in asteroids, on the far sides of moons, and in deep space facilities that existed in the gaps between normal patrol routes. "The Black Fleet has been 30 years in the building," Chen announced. 30 years of preparation for exactly this moment. Every ship in this fleet was designed with a single mission in mind, to carry humanity's response to anyone who would threaten our home. A new voice cut into the communication channel, younger than Zexthal's, sharp with panic. "High Admiral, our sensors are detecting massive power buildups throughout the human fleet. Whatever weapons systems they're using, they're beyond our current understanding of their technological capabilities." Chen's expression hardened. "You demanded Earth's surrender, Admiral Zexthal. You threatened to sterilize our world and enslave our people. Did you really think we would face such threats with nothing but hope and good intentions?" The Black Fleet had completed its emergence now, 20,000 ships arranged in a sphere that completely surrounded the alien formation. Each vessel was a testament to human ingenuity and determination, ships built not just to fight, but to win against opponents with superior technology and numbers. "I'll give you a counteroffer," Chen said. "You have 5 minutes to withdraw your forces from this system and carry a message back to your Galactic Council. Tell them that Earth is under the protection of humanity, and humanity is under the protection of the Black Fleet. Tell them that any future threats against our world will be met with the full force of 20,000 ships designed for one purpose, to ensure that anyone who threatens humanity learns the price of that mistake." "You cannot," Zexthal began. 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Chen interrupted. The alien fleet was in chaos now. Ships were breaking from formation as individual commanders realized the true scope of what they were facing. The perfect attack formation had become a confused cluster of vessels, each one surrounded by enemies on all sides. This is not possible. Zexthal transmitted. The Council's projections were based on incomplete data, Chen finished. You made the fundamental error of assuming that a species capable of interstellar travel would be incapable of keeping secrets. You forgot that humans have been fighting wars since before we discovered fire, and we've learned that the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemy never realizes how badly they've already lost until it's far too late. The countdown on Chen's chronometer showed 3 minutes remaining. Around the edges of the alien formation, several smaller ships were already breaking away, their commanders deciding that discretion was the better part of valor. High Admiral, came another panicked voice from the alien fleet, multiple ships are requesting permission to withdraw. The humans have us completely surrounded, and their energy signatures suggest weapons capabilities far beyond our initial estimates. Chen watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Black Fleet maintained perfect formation, 20,000 ships holding position with the precision that came from years of hidden wargames and secret exercises. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment, men and women who understood that humanity's survival might depend on their ability to project strength when strength was needed most. 2 minutes, Chen announced. Zexthal's next transmission was barely controlled panic. What guarantee do we have that you won't pursue and destroy our fleet if we withdraw? None whatsoever, Chen replied cheerfully. But, I will tell you this, the Black Fleet was built for the defense of humanity. Continue to threaten us, and you'll discover what it was designed to do to those who would harm our people. Withdraw now, and you'll get to carry our message back to the Council intact. And, if we refuse? Chen's smile disappeared entirely. Then, you'll discover why we called it the Black Fleet. 1 minute, 40 seconds. The alien formation was dissolving rapidly now. Individual ships were peeling away from the main fleet, their commanders no longer willing to wait for orders that might never come. The precise battle formation that had seemed so intimidating 12 minutes ago was now a scattered collection of vessels, each one desperately calculating jump coordinates for a retreat that couldn't come fast enough. This isn't over, human. Zexthal transmitted. The Council will not tolerate this defiance. Then, the Council will have the opportunity to learn what happens when they threaten humanity with extinction, Chen replied calmly. Tell them Admiral Chen Wei sends his regards, and that Earth looks forward to their next diplomatic overture. Assuming, of course, that they're capable of learning from their mistakes. With less than 30 seconds remaining on Chen's ultimatum, the alien fleet began its retreat. Ships vanished into hyperspace in ones and twos, then, in larger groups as panic spread through their formation. Within minutes, the only traces of the hegemony battle fleet were the fading energy signatures of their jump drives and the debris from a few ships that had suffered system failures in their haste to escape. Chen stood on his bridge, surrounded by the organized chaos of a crew processing the aftermath of humanity's first real contact with galactic civilization. The Black Fleet maintained its formation around the now empty space where the alien fleet had been, 20,000 ships waiting for orders that might send them across the galaxy to ensure that the message they had just sent was properly understood. Sir, Lieutenant Morrison said quietly, incoming transmissions from Mars Command, Lunar Base, and the Outer System stations. They're all requesting confirmation of mission status. Chen nodded. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. The Black Fleet has revealed itself, and our visitors have been properly educated about the reality of human defensive capabilities. We are now entering Phase 2 active deterrence and message reinforcement. He turned to his tactical officer. Commander Park, begin Phase 2 deployment. I want monitoring stations established at every major hyperspace junction within 50 light-years of Seoul. Any Council fleet larger than a scout group gets a personal visit from a Black Fleet squadron. Understood, sir, Park replied, his fingers already moving over his console to relay the orders. Chen walked to the main viewport and looked out at the stars, where the Black Fleet hung in space like a promise and a threat combined. For 30 years, humanity had prepared for this moment, the moment when they would have to prove that their small, backward planet was not the easy target it appeared to be. Communications, he said. Open a channel to Earth Command. Channel open, sir. This is Admiral Chen Wei aboard the UES Defiance. Phase 1 of Operation Prometheus is complete. The Black Fleet is operational and ready for Phase 2 deployment. Earth is secure, and the galaxy now knows that humanity is not as helpless as we appeared. He paused, looking out at his hidden fleet, 20,000 ships built in secret, crewed by volunteers, and armed with weapons that represented the very best of human ingenuity and determination. The Council wanted Earth to surrender, he said quietly. Instead, they've learned that humanity has no intention of going quietly into that dark night. The Black Fleet is ready to carry that message anywhere in the galaxy that needs to hear it. 3 weeks after the humiliating retreat from Sol, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session aboard the massive station known as Unity's Crown. The station hung in the gravitational balance point between 3 stars, a monument to cooperative civilization that had served as the seat of galactic government for over 8 centuries. High Counselor Thanemore of the Celestial Dominion called the session to order with a gesture of one of his 4 arms, his crystalline body refracting the light from the chamber's bioluminescent panels into shifting patterns of blue and gold. Around the circular chamber, representatives of the 17-member species sat in specialized environmental pods suited to their particular atmospheric and gravitational needs. We are here to address the unprecedented situation that has developed in Sector 7 Alpha, specifically regarding the species known as humans, Thanemore announced, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made his species' speech sound like barely controlled music. High Admiral Zexthal of the Hegemony will present his report. The holographic display at the center of the chamber activated, showing a detailed tactical analysis of what was already being called the Sol incident. Zexthal's scaled form stood rigid at attention, but, even through the hologram, his usual arrogance had been replaced by something much closer to nervous energy. Honored counselors, he began, 3 weeks ago, I led a standard compliance fleet to the human home system to enforce Council Resolution 2847B regarding their continued harboring of free traders and refusal to acknowledge Council sovereignty over their claimed territories. Representative Calthara of the Verdant Collective interrupted with a sound like rustling leaves. Her plant-based physiology required no technological translation. The chemical signals she released communicated her skepticism directly to the atmospheric processors in each pod. A standard compliance fleet, Admiral? 300 heavy cruisers seems excessive for dealing with a species that barely qualifies for spacefaring status. Zexthal's neck frills flared slightly, a sign of irritation among his species. The human resistance to previous diplomatic overtures suggested a more substantial response would be necessary to ensure compliance. Intelligence indicated they possessed 47 active combat vessels of primitive design. Intelligence, said Counselor Vexhan of the Machine Hegemony, his cybernetic voice carrying digital harmonics that sounded like controlled static. Present your findings regarding the accuracy of this intelligence. The tactical display shifted to show the emergence of the Black Fleet. Even in the sterile environment of the Council chamber, the sheer scope of what had been revealed sent a ripple of unease through the assembled representatives. The humans concealed a fleet of approximately 20,000 combat vessels of unknown design, Zexthal reported. These ships demonstrated technological capabilities that exceed our current understanding of human industrial capacity. They were hidden throughout their solar system using methods our intelligence networks failed to detect. Counselor Brextal of the Ancient Paths leaned forward in his gravitic suspension field, his energy-based form pulsing with what might have been concern or curiosity. 20,000 ships? That represents a military force larger than several of our member species maintain. How is it possible that such a fleet could be constructed without our knowledge? That is the question we must address, Thanemore replied. Intelligence Director Quindaleth, present your analysis. A new figure appeared in the chamber's central display, a being whose species was so altered by genetic engineering that their original form was barely recognizable. Quindaleth's multiple sensor organs rotated independently as she accessed her data networks. Honored Council, our investigation reveals a systematic deception that has been operating for approximately 30 standard years, she began. The humans established false energy consumption patterns, created dummy industrial facilities, and manipulated their shipping manifests to hide the true scope of their military production. The display showed a complex web of human activities, mining operations that extracted far more materials than seemed necessary, energy plants that consumed resources for facilities that appeared to not exist, and shipping routes that included stops at coordinates that registered as empty space. They used their asteroid belt as a construction facility, Quindaleth continued. Hundreds of asteroids were hollowed out and converted into hidden shipyards. Additionally, they established construction facilities on the far sides of their natural satellites and created deep space installations in areas our patrol routes did not regularly monitor. Representative Mordun of the warrior clan struck the deck with his massive fist, the sound echoing through his environmental pod. This represents a level of strategic deception that should be impossible for a species of their apparent development level. How did they acquire the technology to build such vessels? Analysis of the energy signatures detected during the incident suggests the ships utilize familiar technologies, but applied in ways we have not previously encountered, Quindaleth reported. Their defensive systems appear to be based on principles similar to our own shielding technology, but with efficiency rates that exceed theoretical maximums. Their propulsion systems show similar characteristics, known principles pushed beyond what our models predict should be possible. Counselor Velthera of the Psychic Communion projected a thoughtform that translated as profound unease. Her species communicated primarily through direct mental contact, but the translation systems converted her concerns into audible speech. This suggests they have not simply acquired advanced technology, but that they have independently developed improvements to systems we consider mature and fully explored. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement settled among the representatives. The Galactic Council's power rested largely on the assumption that they possessed the most advanced technology in known space, distributed among species that had spent millennia perfecting their respective specializations. Admiral Zexthal cleared his throat, a sound like scraping stone. There is another factor that must be considered. The human commander Admiral Chenwei demonstrated detailed knowledge of our fleet composition, positioning, and tactical doctrine. He knew exactly how we would approach the engagement and had prepared specific countermeasures. Elaborate, Thanemore commanded. The Black Fleet's initial positioning was designed to exploit specific weaknesses in our standard battle formations. They emerged from concealment at precisely the moments that would create maximum tactical confusion while minimizing their own exposure. This suggests they have been studying our military procedures for an extended period. Counselor Yethmiran of the Trade Federations activated his species' bioluminescent communication organs, creating patterns that translated to commercial anxiety. If the humans have been conducting covert intelligence operations against Council members, this represents a threat that extends far beyond simple military non-compliance. Our entire relationship with this species must be reconsidered. The debate that followed lasted for several hours, with representatives arguing for responses ranging from immediate military retaliation to formal diplomatic recognition of human sovereignty. It was Counselor Vexon who finally introduced the proposal that would reshape the galaxy's approach to humanity. Council members, his digitized voice announced, we are approaching this situation from an incorrect premise. We have been treating the humans as a developing species that refuses to acknowledge Council authority. The evidence suggests we should instead treat them as an unknown military power that has been observing us while concealing their true capabilities. What do you propose? Thanemore asked. I propose we test their actual capabilities before deciding on a response. A probe in force, not a compliance action, but a direct military challenge designed to determine the true extent of human military technology and tactical competence. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives considered the implications. A probe in force was traditionally used only against peer-level civilizations, species whose military capabilities were roughly equivalent to Council forces. Representative Calthera's chemical emissions indicated sharp disagreement. You propose to escalate a situation that has already demonstrated human superiority in concealment and preparation? What if their actual capabilities exceed what we observed at Sol? Then, we will know that before committing to a course of action that assumes weakness where strength may exist, Vexon replied. The alternative is to base our policy toward humanity on assumptions that have already proven false. High Admiral Zexthal straightened in his display pod. Honored Council, if you authorize a probe in force, I volunteer to command it. My previous encounter with the Black Fleet provides valuable intelligence regarding their tactics and capabilities. Denied, Thanemore said immediately. Your previous engagement resulted in retreat without any meaningful damage assessment of human capabilities. A probe in force requires commanders with experience in peer-level combat operations. "I will command the probe force," declared Admiral Kethvar of the Stellar Navy, her amphibious form rippling with patterns that indicated aggressive confidence. "My fleets have engaged in successful operations against the rogue systems and the independent worlds. Give me 2,000 ships and authorization for full-scale combat operations, and we will determine exactly what these humans are capable of." The vote that followed was closer than many had expected. 7 species supported the probe force proposal, 6 opposed it, and 4 abstained. Under Council rules, the measure passed with a narrow majority. "Very well," Thanemore announced. "Admiral Kethvar is authorized to organize and command a probe force of 2,000 vessels drawn from volunteer contingents of the member fleets. The mission parameters are as follows: engage the human Black Fleet in direct combat, assess their true military capabilities, and determine whether humanity represents a threat to Council security that requires immediate action." Admiral Kethvar's pattern shifted to indicate satisfaction and anticipation. "Understood, honored Counselor. How soon do you require results?" "Intelligence suggests the humans are expanding their patrol operations beyond their home system," Quinduleth interjected. "Our monitoring stations report Black Fleet squadrons establishing positions at strategic hyperspace junctions throughout their local stellar region. If we are going to test their capabilities, we should do so before they complete whatever expansion they are planning." 6 weeks, Thanemore decided. "Admiral Kethvar, you have 6 weeks to assemble your force and engage the humans. The Council will reconvene when you have data regarding their actual military capabilities." As the representatives began to disperse from the chamber, Councillor Brextal's energy form pulsed with what might have been philosophical consideration. "Has it occurred to anyone that we may be making the same mistake with humanity that we have made with other species in the past?" "What mistake is that?" Thanemore asked. "We are assuming that because they are new to our attention, they are necessarily inferior to civilizations that have been known to us for centuries. The evidence suggests that humanity has been preparing for contact with us far longer than we have been preparing for contact with them." The chamber had nearly emptied, but those representatives who remained considered Brextal's words in thoughtful silence. It was a disturbing thought that somewhere in the galaxy, a species had been watching and learning and preparing while the Council assumed their own superiority was unquestionable. Admiral Kethvar's image remained in the central display, her amphibious form already shifting to patterns that indicated strategic planning. Councillor Brextal raises an interesting point, but it is irrelevant to military planning. Whatever advantages the humans may believe they possess, they have not faced a concentrated military response from a peer-level civilization. "My probe force will consist of ships and crews with extensive combat experience against technologically sophisticated opponents." "And if the humans prove to be more capable than your combat experience prepares you for?" Brextal inquired. Kethvar's pattern shifted to indicate supreme confidence. "Then, we will adapt and overcome, as military forces have done throughout galactic history." 20,000 ships seems impressive until you consider that the Council's combined fleets number in the hundreds of thousands. Even if human individual ship capabilities exceed our estimates, they cannot overcome the basic mathematics of force multiplication. After the chamber had emptied and the massive station had returned to its normal operations, Thanemore remained in his private quarters, studying the tactical analyses of the Sol incident. The more he examined the data, the more disturbed he became by what it revealed about human strategic thinking. The Black Fleet's emergence had been perfectly timed and positioned. Every aspect of the operation showed careful planning based on detailed knowledge of Council military doctrine. Even more concerning was what the emergence had demonstrated about human industrial capabilities, the ability to build and maintain 20,000 advanced combat vessels while convincing the galaxy's best intelligence services that they possessed fewer than 50 primitive ships. His personal communication system activated, carrying a priority signal from Intelligence Director Quinduleth. Her multiple sensor organs focused on him from the display screen. "Hi Counselor, we have additional information regarding human activities that may be relevant to the Council's deliberations." Present it. "Our long-range monitoring stations have detected unusual hyperspace distortions in 17 star systems adjacent to human territory. The patterns are consistent with large fleet movements, but we cannot determine specific ship counts or destinations." Thanemore felt a chill that had nothing to do with the atmospheric controls in his chamber. Are you suggesting the humans are deploying additional forces beyond the Black Fleet we observed at Seoul? That is one possibility. Another is that the 20,000 ships we observed represent only a portion of their actual fleet strength. A third possibility is that they are conducting large-scale military exercises in preparation for additional confrontations with Council forces. The High Counselor stared at the tactical display, wondering if the Council had just authorized a probe force to test an enemy whose strength they could not accurately assess. The humans had demonstrated the ability to conceal massive military assets for 3 decades. What else might they be hiding? Director Quindaleth, I want comprehensive surveillance of all human activities. Use every resource at our disposal. If we are going to test their capabilities, I want to be certain we understand what we are testing. Understood, High Counselor. However, I should note that our previous surveillance efforts failed to detect the Black Fleet's construction and deployment. The humans have proven quite capable of concealing activities they do not wish us to observe. After the communication ended, Thanemore remained in his quarters, considering the possibility that the Galactic Council had just made a mistake that would cost them dearly. The humans had demanded respect through strength, and the Council had responded by authorizing a military probe that might confirm their worst fears about human capabilities. In 6 weeks, Admiral Kethvar would lead 2,000 ships against an enemy whose true strength remained unknown. The probe force would provide answers to the Council's questions about human military capabilities. The only question was whether those answers would come in time to prevent a war that the Council might not be prepared to win. Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood in the command center of the hidden facility known as Gibraltar Station, watching the holographic displays that showed Council fleet movements throughout the local galactic region. The station hung in the void between star systems, cloaked and shielded to the point where it was effectively invisible to any sensors not specifically designed to find it. Admiral, reported Captain Rodriguez, her intelligence chief, long-range reconnaissance confirms Council forces are massing at staging point Epsilon. Current count stands at just over 2,000 vessels representing 7 different species fleet contributions. Mitchell nodded grimly. She had expected this response from the Council after the Seoul incident 3 weeks ago. The aliens had been embarrassed by the Black Fleet's revelation, and embarrassed powers typically responded with shows of force designed to restore their sense of superiority. Composition analysis, she asked. Heavy on stellar navy and machine hegemony vessels, with significant warrior clan contributions, Rodriguez replied. This isn't a compliance operation, Admiral. They're bringing their first-line combat units and experienced commanders. Intelligence indicates Admiral Kethvar of the Amphibian Collective is in overall command. Kethvar, Mitchell repeated thoughtfully. She had studied the alien commander's tactical record during her years of preparation for this inevitable confrontation. Aggressive, competent, experienced in peer-level combat operations. They're not sending another parade ground formation this time. The central display shifted to show the current deployment of the Black Fleet. Since the Seoul incident, human forces had rapidly expanded their area of operations, establishing monitoring stations and patrol routes throughout a sphere of space nearly 100 light-years in diameter. What appeared to the Council as defensive positioning was actually the first phase of a much larger strategic plan. Status report on Operation Prometheus Phase 2, Mitchell commanded. Commander Park, her operations chief, activated his display. All monitoring stations are operational and reporting regular intelligence updates. We've identified 17 major Council patrol routes, 43 communication relay stations, and 12 supply depot locations. Phase 2 assets are positioned and ready for immediate deployment. Mitchell walked to the main strategic display, studying the three-dimensional representation of local space. The Council probe force was assembling at a location that would allow them to strike at several of the Black Fleet's outer monitoring stations. It was a tactically sound approach, probe the enemy's extended positions to assess their response capabilities without committing to a full-scale assault. They're going to test us, she said. Kethvar will hit our monitoring stations to see how we react, what forces we commit to their defense, and how quickly we can respond to multiple simultaneous threats. Classic probe-enforce doctrine, agreed Commander Thompson, her tactical specialist. The question is, how do we want to respond? Do we defend the monitoring stations with minimal forces to make them think we're weaker than we are, or do we demonstrate our actual capabilities? Mitchell considered the options. The Black Fleet had been built for a specific purpose, to ensure that any threat to humanity would be met with overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The probe force represented exactly the kind of escalation the fleet had been designed to handle. Neither, she decided. We're going to use this opportunity to send a very clear message about the cost of threatening humanity. Kefvar wants to test our capabilities? Let's give her more information than she bargained for. She turned to her communications officer. Signal all Black Fleet commanders. Activate Operation Prometheus Phase 3. Authorization, Mirror's Edge. Throughout human space, the second wave of preparation began. The Black Fleet that had emerged at Sol represented only the first tier of humanity's hidden military assets. Phase 3 would reveal capabilities that went beyond simple fleet strength into areas the Council had not yet imagined. On the hidden world of Sanctuary, a planet in a star system that didn't appear on any galactic charts, massive shipyards began final preparation sequences for vessels that dwarfed even the Black Fleet's heavy cruisers. These were the Omega-class battleships, each one capable of engaging an entire enemy fleet and emerging victorious. In deep space, automated factories that had been operating in absolute secrecy for decades began accelerating their production schedules. These facilities, built inside captured asteroids and powered by contained stellar cores, manufactured weapons and equipment using principles that humanity had developed during their hidden years of preparation. Admiral Mitchell watched the status reports flooding in from across human space. Operation Prometheus had always been designed as a three-phase revelation of human capabilities. Phase 1 had demonstrated that humanity was not defenseless. Phase 2 had established human territorial claims and monitoring capabilities. Phase 3 would demonstrate that humanity was not merely defensive, but possessed the ability to project force across interstellar distances with devastating effectiveness. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez announced, "We're receiving signals from Council monitoring stations. They're reporting unusual energy signatures and gravitational anomalies throughout their local space. Whatever they're detecting, it's making them nervous." Mitchell smiled. "They're detecting the activation of our deep strike assets. Facilities that have been dormant for years are coming online, and the gravitational signatures of our heavy manufacturing operations are becoming visible to their sensors. Should we be concerned about revealing our industrial capabilities?" Commander Park asked. "At this point, concealment is less important than deterrence," Mitchell replied. "We want the Council to understand that attacking humanity means committing to a war against an enemy whose full capabilities they have not yet seen." The tactical display updated to show the Council probe force beginning its advance toward human space. 2,000 ships in perfect formation, representing some of the finest military assets the galaxy's major powers could field. Under normal circumstances, such a force would be capable of conquering entire star systems. "Estimated time to contact with our outer monitoring stations?" Mitchell asked. 72 hours at their current approach speed, Thompson reported. "Admiral Kefvar is taking her time, probably running deep scans to assess our defensive positions." "Good. That gives us time to complete Phase 3 deployment." Mitchell activated her personal communication array. "Signal Admiral Chan on the Defiance. Begin Operation Hammerfall. I want our demonstration to be memorable." Throughout the galaxy, the hidden network of human assets began to reveal itself. Deep space monitoring stations that had observed Council fleet movements for decades suddenly began broadcasting identification signals. Automated weapon platforms that had waited in strategic asteroid fields for years activated their targeting systems. Most shocking of all, several Council installations began receiving polite messages from human representatives offering to discuss mutual security arrangements. These messages came from locations that Council intelligence had believed were uninhabited systems, suggesting that humanity had established covert bases throughout Council space itself. Admiral Kefvar received her first indication that the probe force was walking into something more complex than anticipated when her intelligence officer reported anomalous readings from their target area. "Admiral," the young officer reported, his amphibian features showing patterns of confusion and concern, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the target region. The signatures suggest the activation of industrial facilities on a scale that exceeds anything in our intelligence estimates." Kefvar studied the sensor displays with growing unease. The human monitoring stations they had planned to probe were now surrounded by energy signatures that indicated the presence of major military installations. Either the humans had managed to conceal an industrial infrastructure that rivaled the Council's major shipyards, or they were activating assets they had kept hidden until now. Analysis of the energy signatures, she demanded. Consistent with antimatter generation facilities, stellar engineering operations, and what might be massive weapon charging sequences, her tactical officer replied. Admiral, if these readings are accurate, the humans possess industrial capabilities that exceed our previous estimates by several orders of magnitude. The probe force continued its advance, but HFY found herself reconsidering the mission parameters. A probe in force was designed to test enemy capabilities through direct engagement, but the intelligence they were gathering suggested that the enemy's capabilities might be far beyond what the probe force was designed to handle. Her communication officer interrupted her thoughts. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human forces. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. Put it through. The main display activated to show Admiral Sarah Mitchell standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a starship. Behind her, tactical displays showed the deployment of thousands of vessels in formations that suggested extensive combat experience and sophisticated command and control capabilities. Admiral HFY, Mitchell said politely, I am Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commanding the 2nd Fleet of the Black Fleet Operations Command. We're aware of your approach to our monitoring stations and wanted to extend an invitation for diplomatic discussion before any unfortunate misunderstandings occur. HFY's skin pattern shifted to indicate suspicion and growing anger. Human Commander, your forces are in violation of Council space sovereignty regulations. Withdraw your installations and submit to lawful authority, or face the consequences of continued defiance. Mitchell's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she was not particularly impressed by the threat. Admiral, I think there may be some confusion about the current strategic situation. Your probe force is operating under the assumption that you're testing the defensive capabilities of a minor species. That assumption is incomplete. The tactical display on Mitchell's bridge updated to show the current position of the Council probe force. What was disturbing was the level of detail the human display showed, not just the position and course of HFY's fleet, but detailed analysis of individual ship types, probable armament configurations, and what appeared to be real-time assessment of their tactical readiness. You've been monitoring our approach, HFY stated. Admiral, we've been monitoring your civilization for 30 years, Mitchell replied calmly. Every fleet movement, every strategic deployment, every tactical exercise your forces have conducted. We know your doctrine, your capabilities, and your standard responses to military pressure. We know because we've been watching and learning while you convinced yourselves that we were too primitive to pose a threat. Behind Mitchell, her tactical displays showed something that made HFY's blood run cold. The supposed monitoring stations the probe force had been sent to test were not isolated outposts, but rather forward elements of a massive defensive network that extended throughout the region. More disturbing still were the energy signatures indicating the presence of additional human forces, fleets that were larger and more sophisticated than anything observed at Sol. What do you want? HFY asked. What we've always wanted, Mitchell replied. To be left alone to develop our civilization without interference from powers that view us as either vassals or resources. The Council demanded Earth's surrender. We declined that generous offer. Now you've sent a probe force to test our resolve. We're prepared to provide you with all the data you need to make an informed decision about the wisdom of continued aggression. And, if we refuse to withdraw? Mitchell's smile was not reassuring. Then, you'll have the opportunity to field test your tactics against an opponent that has spent 3 decades preparing specifically for this kind of engagement. Admiral, your probe force consists of 2,000 ships crewed by experienced officers from 7 different species fleets. It's an impressive force that would be capable of conquering most civilizations. She paused, and her tactical displays updated to show the true scope of the human forces in the area. Unfortunately for your mission, most civilizations haven't spent 30 years in dedicated preparation for exactly this scenario. What you're seeing now is Phase 3 of Operation Prometheus, the revelation that humanity is not merely defensive, but possesses the capability to project force anywhere in this galaxy that threats to our people might emerge. The sensor readings from HFY's fleet were now showing energy signatures that defied easy categorization. Whatever the humans had built during their years of secret preparation, it represented technology and industrial capacity that exceeded the Council's estimates by staggering margins. "I'll give you the same offer Admiral Chan gave to your predecessor," Mitchell continued. 12 hours to withdraw your forces and carry a message back to the Council. Tell them that humanity appreciates their interest in our defensive capabilities, and that we're prepared to demonstrate those capabilities anytime they feel additional education would be beneficial. HFY studied her tactical displays, assessing the strategic situation with growing recognition that the probe force had walked into something far more dangerous than anticipated. The humans were not merely defending monitoring stations, they were defending a territorial claim backed by military assets that appeared to exceed the probe force's ability to effectively challenge. And if the Council decides that humanity represents a threat that requires immediate action, she asked. Then, they'll discover what the Black Fleet was actually built to do, Mitchell replied. Admiral, your species have been spacefaring for millennia, and you've grown accustomed to the idea that technological advancement follows predictable patterns. You've assumed that because humanity is new to your attention, we must necessarily be inferior to civilizations with longer histories of galactic involvement. Her expression hardened. That assumption has led you to make a strategic error. You've attempted to intimidate a species that has spent 30 years preparing for intimidation. You've threatened the home world of a people who have built their entire military doctrine around ensuring that anyone who threatens their home will regret that decision for whatever brief time remains to them. The communication channel closed, leaving Admiral HFY alone with her tactical displays and the growing realization that the probe force had encountered something far beyond their original mission parameters. The humans were not testing defensive capabilities, they were demonstrating offensive ones. Around her, the Council's finest ships waited for orders that would determine whether the galaxy was about to witness a limited engagement between two military forces, or the beginning of a war that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. Admiral HFY stood in the center of her command bridge aboard the Council flagship Eternal Tide, watching her tactical displays with growing concern. The 12-hour deadline the human admiral had given her was now down to less than 2 hours, and the sensor readings from her probe force were painting an increasingly disturbing picture of what they faced. Admiral, her intelligence chief reported, were detecting additional energy signatures throughout the target region. Whatever industrial facilities the humans are activating, they're operating on a scale that suggests massive infrastructure development. Explain, HFY commanded, her skin pattern shifting to display focused attention. The energy output we're detecting is consistent with stellar engineering operations, controlled fusion on a scale that would require containing entire stellar cores. Additionally, we're seeing gravitational anomalies that suggest the presence of artificial gravity wells being generated by unknown mechanisms. HFY studied the tactical display, trying to reconcile what her sensors were showing with what she knew about human technological capabilities. The probe force had been sent to test a species that supposedly possessed limited spacefaring technology. Instead, they had encountered evidence of industrial capabilities that rivaled the Council's most advanced member species. Communication from the human fleet, her operations officer announced. Admiral Mitchell is requesting a response to her offer of withdrawal. Denied, HFY said immediately. Signal the probe force, begin combat approach to the primary target zone. We will test human defensive capabilities through direct engagement. The 2,000 ships of the Council probe force began their final approach to what they believed were isolated human monitoring stations. The formation was precise and professional, ships arranged in overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to concentrate their combined firepower on any defensive positions while maintaining the flexibility to respond to counterattacks. What they discovered when they reached weapons range was that the human monitoring stations were not isolated outposts, but rather forward elements of the most sophisticated military network any of them had ever encountered. The first indication came when Admiral Mitchell's voice filled the communication channels of every ship in the probe force simultaneously. Admiral HFY, you have chosen to test our defensive capabilities. We are prepared to provide you with a comprehensive demonstration. The space around the Council fleet suddenly lit up with energy signatures as thousands of previously undetected objects revealed themselves. What had appeared to be empty space was actually filled with automated defensive platforms, each one capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously. Defensive platforms. Kethvar's tactical officer reported. Thousands of them. They were cloaked using technology we can't identify. The platforms opened fire with weapons that defied easy categorization. Instead of traditional energy beams or kinetic projectiles, they fired what appeared to be controlled bursts of exotic matter that interfered with the fundamental forces holding the target vessels together. Ships that were struck by these weapons found their hulls beginning to break down at the molecular level. Evasive maneuvers. Kethvar ordered. All ships, scatter formation and engage defensive platforms. The Council fleet responded with professional competence, breaking from their approach formation and beginning to engage the human defensive network. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries to come, not because of its scale, but because of what it revealed about the evolution of warfare itself. The human defensive platforms moved with impossible precision, as if they were controlled by a single intelligence rather than individual targeting systems. They coordinated their attacks to create overlapping fields of fire that forced the Council ships into positions where they could be engaged by multiple platforms simultaneously. Even more disturbing was the effectiveness of the human weapons. Council ships that had been designed to withstand the most advanced weapons in known space found their defenses useless against weapons that attacked the fundamental structure of matter itself. Admiral, the tactical officer called out. We've lost 17 ships in the first exchange. The human weapons are unlike anything in our tactical databases. Kethvar watched her displays with growing horror as ship after ship reported critical damage from weapons that seemed to ignore conventional defensive technologies. The probe force was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that was demonstrating technological superiority in every engagement parameter. Signal retreat, she ordered. All ships, withdraw to her orders were interrupted by Admiral Mitchell's voice on the general communication channel. Admiral Kethvar, the demonstration is not yet complete. You wanted to test our capabilities. Allow us to show you what humanity has built during our years of preparation. The tactical display updated to show new contacts emerging throughout the battle zone. These were not defensive platforms, but actual starships, vessels that dwarfed even the largest ships in the Council fleet. The Black Fleet heavy cruisers that had revealed themselves at Sol were impressive, but these new ships represented an entirely different class of military vessel. Omega-class battleships, Mitchell announced. Each one capable of engaging an entire fleet and emerging victorious. We built 12 of them during the 30 years you believed we were too primitive to pose a threat. The closest battleship opened fire on a cluster of Council heavy cruisers. The weapon it used created what could only be described as a controlled tear in spacetime itself, a localized distortion that pulled the target vessels out of normal space and deposited them in what appeared to be a parallel dimension from which no communication or sensor contact was possible. What are they doing to our ships? Kethvar demanded. Analysis suggests dimensional displacement, her science officer reported, his voice carrying the confusion of someone trying to describe phenomena beyond his training. The human weapons appear to be manipulating spacetime to remove targets from this reality entirely. The battle, if it could still be called that, continued for another 30 minutes. By the end, the Council probe force had been reduced from 2,000 ships to fewer than 300. Most of the losses were not destroyed vessels, but ships that had been removed from the battle through weapons and tactics that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of space combat. Admiral Mitchell's image appeared on the main display of every surviving Council ship. Admiral Kethvar, this concludes our demonstration of Phase 3 defensive capabilities. Your probe force has been neutralized with minimal loss of life, most of your vessels and crews have been displaced to secure dimensions where they can await recovery once this situation is resolved. Kethvar found herself staring at tactical displays that showed the complete failure of what had been intended as a show of Council strength. The probe force had been not just defeated, but dismissed, handled by an enemy that had demonstrated the ability to remove threats from the battlefield without necessarily destroying them. What do you want? She asked, echoing the question she had posed during their first contact. What we have always wanted, Mitchell replied. To be left alone to develop our civilization without interference. However, since the Council has repeatedly demonstrated its inability to respect that simple request, we are now prepared to ensure our security through more direct means. The tactical display updated to show something that made Kethvar's remaining crew fall silent. Throughout Council space, not just in the local region, but, across hundreds of star systems, human ships were revealing themselves. The monitoring stations and patrol routes the Black Fleet had established were not defensive positions, but forward elements of a massive strategic deployment. For the past 3 weeks, while you prepared your probe force, we have been positioning assets throughout Council territory, Mitchell explained. Every major military installation, every strategic shipyard, every critical communication relay in Council space is now under observation by human forces equipped with the same dimensional displacement weapons you've just experienced. This is an act of war, HFY said. No, Admiral, Mitchell corrected. This is a demonstration of why declaring war on humanity would be inadvisable. We have not attacked Council civilian populations or destroyed Council military assets. We have simply positioned ourselves to ensure that any future attempts to threaten humanity will be met with immediate and decisive response. The communication channel shifted to show Admiral Chen Wei aboard the Defiance, now positioned in orbit around one of the Council's major military installations. Admiral Kethvar, your government demanded Earth's surrender and threatened to sterilize our world when we declined. You then sent a probe force to test our resolve. We have now demonstrated that humanity possesses both the capability and the willingness to ensure our security through whatever means prove necessary. The Council will not tolerate this occupation of our space, Kethvar replied, though her tone lacked conviction. It's not an occupation, Mitchell said. It's a security arrangement. Our forces will maintain their positions until the Council formally acknowledges humanity's right to exist without interference. Once that recognition is granted and demonstrated through concrete policy changes, we will withdraw to our own territory and return to our preferred state of peaceful development. And if the Council refuses? Chen's expression hardened. Then, the Council will discover that the demonstration you've just witnessed represents the minimum level of force we're prepared to apply. Admiral, humanity spent 30 years preparing for the possibility that we would have to fight for our right to exist. We built weapons and developed tactics specifically for use against opponents with superior numbers and advanced technology. The surviving ships of the probe force received new sensor readings that indicated the arrival of additional human forces, not dozens or hundreds of vessels, but thousands of ships emerging from hyperspace throughout the local region. This is the Second Fleet, Mitchell announced. One of 7 identical formations currently positioned at strategic locations throughout Council space. Each fleet is equipped with the same dimensional displacement weapons and Omega-class battleships you've encountered here. Each fleet is under orders to respond to any threat against humanity or human interests with immediate and overwhelming force. Kethvar studied her tactical displays with the growing realization that the probe force had not tested human capabilities so much as triggered a demonstration that revealed the Council's fundamental misunderstanding of what they were dealing with. We built 7 fleets, Chen continued, because our analysis indicated that the Council's response to a demonstration of human strength would be to escalate rather than negotiate. We wanted to ensure that any escalation would be met with force sufficient to end the conflict quickly and decisively. The Council has hundreds of thousands of ships, Kethvar pointed out. The Council has hundreds of thousands of ships designed to fight conventional opponents using conventional weapons and tactics, Mitchell corrected. We spent 30 years developing unconventional weapons specifically designed to neutralize numerical superiority. Your probe force has just experienced the effectiveness of those weapons against Council military technology. The tactical display updated one final time to show the strategic situation throughout the galaxy. Human forces were now positioned at every major Council installation, armed with weapons that had proven capable of neutralizing Council fleets without necessarily destroying them. Admiral Kethvar, Mitchell said formally, you will carry a message to the Galactic Council. Humanity offers one final opportunity for peaceful resolution of this situation. The Council will formally recognize human sovereignty and withdraw all claims of authority over human territory. In exchange, humanity will withdraw our forces from Council space and return to our preferred policy of non-interference in galactic politics. And if the Council refuses? Then, the Council will learn why we called them the Black Fleets, Chen replied. The forces you've encountered represent our defensive capabilities. Should the Council choose to escalate this situation further, they will discover what we built to carry humanity's response to anyone who threatens our existence. The communication channel closed, leaving Admiral Kethvar alone with the wreckage of what had been intended as a demonstration of Council strength. Instead, the probe force had triggered a revelation that would force the galaxy's major powers to confront an uncomfortable truth: humanity was not the primitive species they had believed, but a military power that had prepared for 30 years to fight a war they hoped never to have to win. The few hundred surviving ships of the probe force began their long journey back to Council space, carrying with them the knowledge that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in ways that would require fundamental reassessment of every strategic assumption the Council had made about humanity and their place in the galactic community. 6 months after Admiral Kethvar's return to Council space with news of the probe force's destruction, High Counselor Thanemore stood in his private chambers aboard Unity's Crown, reading the final intelligence reports on humanity's strategic deployment throughout the galaxy. The scope of what the humans had accomplished during their decades of secret preparation was still difficult to comprehend. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in continuous deliberation for weeks, with representatives struggling to understand how their fundamental assumptions about galactic power structures had been so completely wrong. The humans had not merely hidden military assets, they had constructed an entirely parallel civilization designed specifically to counter Council superiority. A chime indicated an incoming communication, and Intelligence Director Quindaletha's image appeared in Thanemore's private display. Her multiple sensor organs rotated independently as she accessed the latest surveillance data. "High Counselor," she reported, "we have completed our assessment of human strategic positions throughout Council space. The intelligence is disturbing. Present your findings." The display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of indicators marking human positions. What had initially appeared to be a limited deployment now revealed itself as the most comprehensive strategic operation in recorded galactic history. Human forces are positioned at every major military installation, industrial facility, and communication hub in Council space, Quindaleth continued. Additionally, they have established monitoring stations at strategic hyperspace junctions that would allow them to intercept any large-scale fleet movements. Effectively, they have created a surveillance and interdiction network that encompasses the entirety of Council territory. Thanemore studied the display with growing unease. How is this possible? Our own intelligence networks should have detected such extensive infiltration. Analysis suggests the humans began this deployment decades ago, long before they revealed themselves at Sol. They used automated systems and deep space construction facilities to position assets throughout our territory while maintaining the appearance of limited spacefaring capability. The level of strategic planning required for such an operation suggests intelligence capabilities that exceed our own. What about their actual military strength? How many ships do they actually possess? Quindaletha's sensor organs focused on new data streams. That remains unclear. Our encounters with the Black Fleet and Admiral Mitchell's forces suggest they possess at least 50,000 combat vessels of advanced design. However, the energy signatures we've detected from their hidden industrial facilities indicate production capabilities that could support much larger fleet strengths. The communication system announced an incoming priority signal from the Council chambers. Thanemore acknowledged it, and Representative Kelthera's image appeared in his display, her plant-based form showing signs of significant stress. "High Counselor," she transmitted, "the Council is requesting your immediate presence. We have received formal communications from the human government." Thanemore made his way to the Council chambers, where the assembled representatives waited in various states of anxiety and confusion. The central display showed a human diplomatic delegation led by a woman he had not seen before, someone whose bearing suggested high governmental authority rather than military command. "Honored Council," the human representative began, "I am Secretary of State Elena Vasquez, representing the United Earth government. I have been authorized to present humanity's formal position regarding the current situation between our civilizations." Thanemore took his position at the center of the chamber. "Proceed, Secretary Vasquez." The United Earth government acknowledges that recent military demonstrations have created tension between humanity and the Galactic Council. These demonstrations were necessitated by the Council's repeated threats against human sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are prepared to discuss the terms under which normal diplomatic relations can be established. Representative Mordun of the warrior clans activated his display aggressively. "Your forces occupy Council territory and threaten our installations. This is an act of war that demands immediate response. Vasquez's expression remained diplomatically neutral. Representative Mordun, I think you may have misunderstood the current strategic situation. Human forces are not occupying Council territory, we are protecting our own security interests while providing the Council with an opportunity to reconsider its approach to human-Council relations. You have positioned weapons platforms throughout our space, protested Councillor Vexon of the Machine Hegemony. How is this not an occupation? Because we have not interfered with Council civilian activities, commercial operations, or normal governmental functions, Vasquez replied calmly. Our security deployment is specifically focused on ensuring that future threats against humanity can be addressed before they reach our territory. Think of it as an early warning system with enforcement capabilities. Thanemore leaned forward in his gravitational field. What are your terms for withdrawal of these forces? Formal recognition of human sovereignty over currently claimed human territory, establishment of diplomatic relations based on mutual respect rather than Council authority, and binding agreements that future disputes will be resolved through negotiation rather than military threats. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives debated among themselves. The idea of treating humanity as an equal power rather than a subject species represented a fundamental change in Council policy that would have implications far beyond the current crisis. Councillor Brextal's energy form pulsed with philosophical consideration. Secretary Vasquez, your government has demonstrated military capabilities that suggest technological advancement beyond our previous understanding. How did humanity achieve such rapid development? Representative Brextal, I think you've misunderstood the timeline, Vasquez replied. Humanity did not achieve rapid development, we achieved covert development. Our technological advancement has been proceeding for centuries, but we made the decision to conceal our capabilities until such time as concealment was no longer possible. Why? Asked Councillor Velfera of the Psychic Communion. Vasquez activated her own display, showing a timeline of human Council contact over the past several decades. Because every interaction we had with Council representatives made it clear that you viewed us as either potential vassals or convenient resources. We learned early that revealing our true capabilities would likely result in preemptive military action designed to prevent us from becoming a threat to Council hegemony. So you prepared for war, Thanemore stated. We prepared to survive contact with a galactic civilization that had already demonstrated its willingness to use military force against species that refused to submit to Council authority, Vasquez corrected. The Black Fleet and our associated military assets were not built for conquest, they were built to ensure that humanity would never be in a position where we had to choose between submission and extinction. Representative Yethmiran of the Trade Federations activated his communication organs. What assurance do we have that humanity will not use these military capabilities for aggressive expansion once this crisis is resolved? The same assurance we requested from you, none whatsoever, Vasquez replied. The difference is that humanity has demonstrated through our actions that we prefer to be left alone to develop our own civilization. We have not made demands for Council territory, Council resources, or Council submission. We have simply made it clear that attempting to impose such demands on us will be expensive. The debate continued for several hours, with representatives struggling to accept the fundamental change in galactic power dynamics that humanity's revelation had created. Finally, Thanemore called for order. Secretary Vasquez, the Council requires time to consider your proposals. What timeline do you propose for these negotiations? High Councillor, we understand that major policy changes require careful deliberation. However, our security deployment is expensive to maintain, and our military commanders are concerned about the long-term stability of the current situation. We would appreciate a formal response within 60 standard days. And, if the Council's response is unsatisfactory to your government? Vasquez's diplomatic demeanor did not change, but something in her eyes suggested that she was conveying a message that had been carefully crafted by people who understood the realities of interstellar politics. Then, humanity will be forced to conclude that diplomatic resolution is not possible, and we will implement our long-term security policy accordingly. High Councillor, I want to be very clear about something. The military assets you have encountered represent our minimum response to threats against human security. Should the Council choose to escalate this situation into actual warfare, you will discover that we built additional capabilities specifically for that contingency. After the diplomatic session ended, Thanemore remained in the chamber with a small group of senior representatives, discussing the implications of humanity's ultimatum.
"They're bluffing," insisted Mordun.
No single species could possibly possess military capabilities sufficient to threaten the combined fleets of all Council members. The probe force reported complete tactical defeat by forces using weapons and tactics beyond our current understanding, Councillor Vexon pointed out. Additionally, their current deployment demonstrates strategic planning capabilities that exceed our own intelligence services.
Brextal's energy form pulsed with thoughtful consideration. "We are debating this situation from an incorrect premise. We continue to think of humanity as a single species that has achieved unexpected technological advancement. What if they are something else entirely?"
"Explain," Thanemore requested.
"What if humanity represents the emergence of a new type of galactic civilization, one that developed specifically to counter the military and political dominance of established powers?
Their concealment, their weapons technology, their strategic planning, all of it suggests a civilization that was designed from the beginning to fight and win against numerically superior opponents."
The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this possibility.
If Brextal was correct, then humanity was not simply another spacefaring species seeking recognition, but rather a fundamentally different approach to galactic civilization that challenged every assumption the Council had made about the nature of interstellar power.
Intelligence Director Quindaleth, Thanemore activated his communication array. "What is your assessment of human industrial capabilities based on current intelligence?"
"High Counselor, our analysis suggests that humanity possesses distributed manufacturing capabilities that may exceed the combined industrial output of all Council members. Their asteroid belt facilities, deep space stations, and hidden shipyards represent an industrial infrastructure that was built specifically for military production.
How long would it take us to match such capabilities?"
"Conservative estimates suggest several centuries of dedicated effort, assuming we could develop the technological expertise required."
"High Counselor, humanity appears to have solved engineering problems that we are still researching."
Thanemore dismissed the communication and turned back to his fellow representatives. "The Council faces a choice that will determine the future structure of galactic civilization. We can accept humanity's terms and establish diplomatic relations based on mutual respect, or we can attempt to maintain our traditional dominance through military action against an opponent whose capabilities we cannot accurately assess."
"And if we choose military action and lose?" asked Velfara.
"Then, the Galactic Council ceases to exist as the dominant power in this region of space, and humanity becomes the arbiter of galactic politics," Brextal replied. "The question is whether we believe our conventional forces can defeat an enemy that has demonstrated unconventional weapons and tactics specifically designed to neutralize numerical superiority." The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone had expected. 9 species supported accepting humanity's terms and establishing formal diplomatic relations. 7 opposed, favoring continued military pressure.
1 abstained.
"The motion carries," Thanemore announced.
"The Galactic Council formally recognizes human sovereignty over claimed human territory and authorizes the establishment of diplomatic relations based on mutual respect and non-interference."
3 days later, Secretary Vasquez returned to Unity's crown for the formal signing of what would become known as the Terran Accords, the agreement that established humanity as the newest member of the galactic community on terms that recognized them as equals rather than subjects. Admiral Chanwei stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as human forces throughout the galaxy began their withdrawal to human territory. The Black Fleet had served its purpose, demonstrating that humanity was prepared to fight for its right to exist, and that any future threats would be met with force sufficient to ensure they were not repeated. "Signal from Earth Command," his communications officer reported.
"Phase 4 authorization has been received." Chen nodded.
Phase 4 was the longest phase of Operation Prometheus, the gradual revelation of human civilization's true scope and capabilities to a galaxy that was still adjusting to the reality that the species they had dismissed as primitive had been preparing for this confrontation for generations. "Very good," he replied.
"Signal all Black Fleet commands, begin Phase 4 deployment."
It's time for our new neighbors to learn what humanity has been building while they thought we were still struggling with basic spaceflight. As the Black Fleet began its next evolution, the galaxy entered a new era, one in which the balance of power among the stars would be determined not by who had ruled the longest, but by who had prepared the best for the moment when preparation would be tested against reality.